to their former glory. Thanks very much indeed.
Thanks, Mark. And look, Mark, it's been great working with your team and setting up their conference here. And actually, over the last few years, you have a great team here in Ireland under Mark Horton. So now, look, I'm going to introduce our keynote speaker for today. She really needs no introduction at all. But anyway, I'll do the introduction. It's Ella McSweeney, a journalist and a reporter, who also holds a degree in zoology from Trinity College in Dublin and a master's in food science and policy from the City University in London. Ella works across radio, television and print media, including RTE, BBC, The Guardian, and Irish Times, among others. Ella has presented a wide range of radio shows for RTE, including Shanks Mare documentary on One, Into the Deep, the award-winning Mind Matters, Future Tense, Nature's Web, the Green Light, Farming Week, Countrywide, and indeed has presented, being a guest presenter on the Ryan Tubridy Show. For BBC, she has reported on and presented the Farming Today on your farm and the food programme on Radio 4 and documentaries on the BBC World Series. Ella, as you're all well aware, is probably most famous here in Ireland for the Ear to the Ground, RTE's food and farming programme, and has been presenter on that since 2009. Ella has also done The Big Week on the Farm, the Consumer Show, and more recently, Open for Business. So as I said, Ella needs no introduction, so over to you, Ella.
Thank you so much, Ray. And thank you so much for that introduction. I could shorten it by just saying all I do is I'm like a magpie on other people's work and all the amazing work that happens in the world. All I do is report on it. But I'm very grateful to you, and I'm just delighted to be here with you. And I'm so looking forward to hearing the talks this morning. It is a remarkable lineup. And it is, as Mark was saying, in the context of everything that we have had in the last couple of months, most importantly, COP, such an important time. And I certainly myself feel that there's such a groundswell of interest in and concern for our majestic rivers that we are so lucky to have around Ireland. And I know that the communities around Ireland will be looking to all of you for guidance and direction in terms of how they can harness that energy and make sure that these rivers are in good shape, as they have been historically in Ireland for so long, for future generations. So it's my real pleasure to be here with you and to give a short talk. There is nothing that I can tell all of you in this area that's new. I've been so privileged, though, in my time working as a reporter, to spend some time with the most remarkable water advocates around Ireland, scientists and also communities. And it's given me a remarkable insight into life underwater, but also the love that so many people hold for their local waterway. And I want to start, if it's okay, with a little bit of a personal story. Can you just can you see that screen there? Yeah, you can see that screen. So this, one of the earliest memories I have of my childhood is lying flat on my stomach on a cracked, very old bridge in my garden, peering down at the water as it flowed through. And this is about 30 years ago. I am very privileged to have grown up in a small garden with a stream running through it. This photo that you can see here, you can see, I hope, just a little bit of the stream there on the left-hand side. And this stream was very, very formative in my own interest in wildlife and ecology from an early age. And it gave me, it was sort of stimulated me to kind of go on the journey I went on in terms of studying zoology in my subsequent career. So I remember lying on my stomach, and what I was waiting for was to see the eels. And eels, as many of you know, only ever will offer you a sort of a glimpse of them as they make their way. But if you're lucky enough, they may loiter in their kind of beautifully charismatic sinewed pattern for a little bit longer. And the view that I had was of this sort of 2-meter wide stream of fresh water that surfaced through our garden in a sort of a short way. And, you know, this kind of privilege of having a stream in your life as a child, it was a constant source of intrigue and entertainment and danger when I was a kid. But it was a place of life and death where we saw dragonflies and coots and herons and minnows and all the aquatic life that formed part of an interdependent web. It comes down from the Wicklow Dublin Mountains and heads out to the sea. And, you know, it surfaced, as I said, in our water. And in the past, it's got an interesting history. The entire route was, of course, open and not culverted as so much of it is now. And it had kind of semi-sacred significance. People ascribed healing virtues to this particular stream. There are records dating back to the 12th century showing that locals would actually visit it, fill up their empty vessels with water, and it's water that they would later use in the protection against the curse of leprosy. There was perhaps something in that water, but this is what they believed in. And when I was younger, I remember older people would talk and echo those stories from their childhood. And they talk in elegiac ways about the stream, about the demise and disappearance of the lepers rivulet, as they called it, which had subsequently then disappeared under culverts by, you know, engineers whose solution to flood risk was actually just to put the water underground into culverts. But it enters our garden through a culvert, and I always felt it was like gasping for air when it comes out. And it had this life when I was younger. So I was waiting on my stomach to look over the bridge for these eels. And then I noticed, as I did, you know, many times, the big dark shadow, this thick, beautiful rope of an eel. Sorry, this is the stream as well. You can see it there. And then I saw the eel, and this sort of amazing creature with a sort of serpent's head and a fat snake's body with such charismatic energy, and witnessing their journey through this little stream was part of my privilege of having this kind of gush of water through the garden. And I suppose, you know, why am I telling you this? Well, when I was 15, the eels stopped coming. And a year before that, I remember the bird life had noticeably dwindled as well. And the stream was no longer a flowing life source. It was a body of water in name only. And this is my stream today. I don't know, can I, yeah, there you go. This is my stream last week. It has been dammed, it has been blocked, it's been disrupted. In a few places it surfaces, but it is now used as a kind of bin to cater for rubbish, buckets of cement, soil, you know, overflow for development. And I definitely think of the people hundreds of years ago sitting on their haunches by the banks, filling up this curative water from the leper stream. And I think of the eels and the minnows and the coots. This now is little more than a stretch of water with a very rich backstory, a kind of, think of it as a kind of ghost ship waiting to be exorcised from the confines of the concrete culverts and the pollution and the rubbish that flows through it and brought back to life. And I know, partly because of the good work of all of you do, that this is 100% possible. I always feel, because I'm so downstream of the upstream, that the upstream is always a bit of a mystery, but downstream is the result of what is happening further up. And bringing the life back to our waters, and for communities to be at the forefront of making that happen, is something that is a constant source of inspiration and hope. You know, being in the same place as I have been and seeing this particular rivulet change over time, you can see and be very in tune with the improvements, or in this case, the kind of tragic demise of a waterway. But if you are not in the same place as people less privileged than I am aren't, and you are looking for a marker, then there is nothing better than the freshwater pearl mussel. And I know it is something familiar to so many of you, and it was lovely to hear you mention it, Mark, as well. And I think the challenges that many of us face have always been, to my mind anyway, encapsulated by this remarkable, majestic, phenomenal species, this dark coloured mollusk with this iridescent inner shell. It is a river dweller that is absolutely, to my mind, no doubt, Ireland's most remarkable species. They've existed for hundreds of millions of years. They are our longest living invertebrate. And it is pretty mind-blowing to think that there are freshwater pearl mussels in our rivers today that were born in the 1890s. And we are, of course, as I don't need to say this to any of you, you know this already, we are so blessed and so lucky to have such a significant population at the European level. In Europe, they have been you know, they've just disappeared. And so, sorry, this is a short video just in Connemara, beautiful Delphi Valley, and you can see the freshwater pearl mussels there. And this is something we filmed a couple of months ago as part of the remarkable efforts that are being driven by scientists and advocates and farmers up and down the West Coast, trying to bring these freshwater pearl mussels to life and make sure that they can actually start to reproduce again. And I just like to say on that note, what I will always remember is a farmer saying to me that he now has a WhatsApp group for all the farmers who are trying to bring the freshwater pearl mussel back to life, and they have a kind of peer pressure and competition between them about, you know, results-based schemes and scoring their fields in a beneficial way that ends up being beneficial to this amazing mollusk. But back to 2006, and I was very, very lucky and blessed, and I will never forget this, being down in Dunmore Wood, where I spent a remarkable day. This is that little shaded part there. You can see where it is. with one of the most remarkably committed scientists out there, Dr. Evelyn Moorkins. And here Evelyn is on that day looking for the Douro pearl mussel. You can't find this anywhere else in the world. And every year there were fewer and fewer of them, as reproduction is sort of impossible because of road building around the time of the Celtic Tiger, and also agricultural nutrients and all the rest. And a little bit like a lost village that has lost all its young people to emigration, all that remained in this river were the older generation, and they were unable to reproduce because of the quality, or the poor quality of the water. And the Douro pearl mussel was named by an Irish molluscan scientist called R.A. Phillips, who described it as a new species in 1928, and it's in lime-loving water. It always struck me as just so fascinating that, you know, the rest of pearl mussels are in acidic water, and yet the Douro pearl mussel adapted to love the lime. It's not even found in tributaries of the Nore that have acid water nearby. So it was a really, really special time, and we actually ended up finding one. This is obviously the amazing Evelyn, whose dedication is just phenomenal, and really I feel that she is someone, when it comes to rivers, that has such an important story and lesson for all of us. You know, but we spotted one that day that Evelyn was looking for one, a kidney-shaped hard shell with a dark color, and it had these tree rings around it. The one we saw was about 60 years old, and it was sitting in that patch of river, you know, filtering water all its life. And, you know, pearl mussels are just an endless source of fascination. They're kind of stuck in time. They're in a rapid decline in Ireland, as we know, but they ask a lot of humans. They ask a lot of us. They need pristine water. They need healthy salmon and trout populations. They need us not to hunt for them for their pearls, as this gentleman you can see doing in the river Owen Riff in Uachtarard in 1895. But they have an extraordinary life, dependent on so many external factors that really ask of us to behave within the planetary limits that we need to. And their daily life, you could see them there on the right hand side. You kind of imagine it like the old cliched man at a bar just drinking and drinking. They sort of inhale and suck in about 100 pints of water over 24 hours. They do literally clean our water for us. But as I say, there is something very fundamental about the questions they ask of us. They're kind of like the bellwether, you know, of how we are living our lives. And that old sort of cliche of the canary in the coal mine is so true when it comes to the pearl mussel. If they're there, better still, if they're reproducing, we know that we're doing things right. In many ways, we don't need to know anything else about that river. If the pearl mussels are there, we're doing things okay. If they're not, we are not. And you can see the beautiful fish populations there as well. And so we turn to ourselves then, and here, and I don't want to be too bleak in this talk, and I will come to some positivity, but I do think it's very, very important for us to look also at the estuaries, because I think the estuaries, a little bit like with the pearl mussel, are an expression of human activity, the collective human activity that has happened with all the rivers around the catchment. And we can tell the story going back to that idea of humans living within our limits, the limits that we have to live in to share this beautiful island as we do with so many incredible species that we are so lucky to have. Estuaries in some of the most beautiful parts of Cork clogged up with nutrients, as we can see here, primarily from agriculture, is what the scientists tell us. This scientist in particular has done some remarkable work, Dr. Liam Morrison from NUI Galway. And I suppose if we want to get back to our historically high levels of river quality, and why the hell wouldn't we, then it's time to pay attention to this alarming pace of deterioration, to acknowledge it. Yes, we may still be best of a bad class in Europe, but that's not a big boast, because of the alarming deterioration of what we are seeing, particularly in the south and the southeast. And I think it's particularly tragic in the beautiful fate, you know, our three sisters rivers, the Nore, the Barrow and the Shore. And this is just a silly video of me and my friends. We often go up the Barrow together. It's a lovely way to see the rivers. And this is Clashganny and the Barrow. This is a river that looks beautiful from the surface, but it is struggling phenomenally with excess nutrients. I think it's at 5.5 megs at the moment. And so if our estuaries are healthy, if the pearl mussels are there, we know we are doing the right thing. This is a beautiful photograph I found from the 1970s of the River Blackwater, you know, one of the most beautiful rivers that we have in Ireland. And of course, we know that the River Bride in Cork is a tributary of the Blackwater. And like so many of our rivers, it has a kind of historical sacred significance. Its name comes from Bridget, the flame-haired pagan goddess of water, but it is struggling, and consequently the Blackwater is struggling too. And I remember a conversation I had last year with a retired teacher down there, Barry Curtin. And, you know, like so many people of an older generation, he pays attention to what is going on. And you have this sort of idea of a shifting baseline. People like me of a slightly younger generation aren't aware of what he has seen in his experience. And it's why I feel it is so important when we're talking about rivers to listen to and honor the experiences of older people, however anecdotal, in terms of the kind of bind that we get into with shifting baseline syndrome, that we think what we see is normal. And Barry told me that, you know, when he was younger, he would often search for a soft mossy stone to sit and fish in the River Bride, and it was full of life, he said. But he hasn't fished the river in years because he is appalled by the extent of water pollution. And it's interesting to note that the Blackwater used to have 30,000 pearl mussel. Today, the pearl mussel is barely clinging on. But this is what Barry said. The River Bride was an incredibly diverse place. The cleanliness of the water, the damselflies, the dippers, full of life. But if you stand in Fermoy and look at the Blackwater at the high water level, you can see the slime. There is no doubt about it. We've crossed a threshold. It is saturated in pollution. And again, I don't need to say any of this to you. We know that this is the case. And, you know, we are just lucky that we are tuned in at hopefully an early enough stage to really try and reverse this trend. And we know again about the nutrient problem in Ireland, and you can see there south and the southeast, but also Tolka being a problem with wastewater in the kind of eastern part of Ireland as well. But then getting to the positive. And I think that what is so positive, and I apologize, there's no women in these photographs. There are plenty of women farmers. I just couldn't find their photographs. So please be rest assured that this is not representative of the action that's happened. But these are some amazing people. You know, we know the pressures from the past. We know chemical spills from industry have caused fish kills. We know that there's fish kills from slurry in the past. But the pressures now, as we've seen from this, feel a little bit endless and exhausting because of nutrients in agriculture, putting pressure in the south and the southeast on the rivers. But so many people want to reverse this threshold that we are crossing. And in the last 20 years, I must say, at a local level, I have met so many, been so blessed to meet so many of these people with incredible energy at hyper local level who are noticing and harnessing their energy. There's a lot to be done. And what can we do? So these people doing remarkable work. And I just want to point out a few individual farmers who are taking things into their own hands, who really, you know, are just doing such incredible, making such efforts, and they're not waiting for the systemic change that, quite frankly, we need urgently to happen. It may not happen until that happens, individual farmers. So we have here on the left, Donal Sheehan, a dairy farmer in Cork and the River Bride, who's harnessing a whole valley, a whole catchment together to make change. We have in the middle, Brian Costello, a remarkable dairy farmer in Roscommon, who is, you know, working so well. He's got curlews and orchids on his farm. We have on the right-hand side, young Cathal Flood in Monaghan, who's doing absolutely incredible work in measuring nitrates and phosphates on his farm and really showing that sort of curiosity and taking control back, if you like, of what he is doing. And then below there, we have John McHugh, another dairy farmer in Laois, who again has been absolutely the head of the curve, at the forefront of really working in a more ecological way, working within understanding the limits of the land that he looks after, shall we say. He owns it, but he looks after it for future generations. And then we also have Tillage Farmers. And I just want to mention very briefly these two. So on the left, we have Michael Dunn, and on the right, we have his son, Norman Dunn. And 4 years ago, Norman noticed that the birds weren't following the tractor as he was ploughing his field. He's a very large tillage farm in Kildare, near Maynooth there. And what would be the point of the birds following the tractor, because the soils were completely dead. And so Norman decided there and then he's going to move rapidly away from the kinds of things that are seeping into our waterways, nitrogen fertilizer in particular. And now he's transformed parts of his farm, and he's on this journey, this remarkable journey, where I just think it'll end up being just an absolute sort of nature-rich farm that also can produce produce and food. And you can see there, within a couple of years, his soils are oozing with life. I was on Norman's farm again a few weeks ago, and he was showing me his waterway at the edge of his farm. One of the things he's done, such an easy thing, it was always done in the past. And isn't it true that we kind of end up coming full circle in terms of what was done before, by, you know, the thousands of years of experience that farmers have in terms of managing their land. And behind Norman there, you see the cover crop that he plants to make sure that when in between crops, in between harvests, there is not bare soil, but he is actually planting in this amazing array of various things like phacelia, chicory, plantain, all the things that are marvelous for insects, but also crucially when it comes to waterways, means that he has He secures the soil. He makes sure that the soil doesn't run off into the waterways. And I was standing at the edge of this field in the waterway right beside his farm that he feels a lot of responsibility for. And he really wants to make sure that where he can, he is not contributing to the silting up of that river. He is not contributing to nutrient runoff. And he is doing his best to make sure that he works within the limits of his farm, the planetary limits of the farm that he owns. He's so lucky to own. And so, you know, there is, as I said, not systemic change. We need that urgently, but these farmers are ploughing ahead with what they know is right to the betterment of all of us. But we're not all farmers. We don't all own lots of land. But something I really feel strongly in Ireland we can all do is use this little piece of EU water law, which I know will be familiar to Mark and those in the UK. And I know that it is somewhat paradoxical to suggest that what rivers in Ireland need is more humans in them. But getting bathing site status for a river can trigger a legal, or does trigger a legal obligation of local authorities to test the water and, crucially, in my mind, inform and engage with the public in the local area about what the results are, what the source of the pollution is, or the problem is, and what they're going to do to make it better. It is not going to solve all the problems, but I really believe it could be quite transformative at local level and give people the much needed sense of sort of power and control that local people need to know that they are contributing and doing something. Now, Ireland has 139 designated beaches under this law, 9 designated lakes, but there are no designated rivers in Ireland yet. And I really believe that this could be a powerful way to activate communities as part of the bigger load of a bigger range, as of actions that they can take, which I know all of you are so heavily involved in. And I just want to point out one person here. I'm not in any way politically affiliated. Obviously, I'm just a journalist, but I was contacted after I reported on this by a councillor called Wayne Harding, and he now is trying to get a section of the River Boyne designated under this EU law. And I think it is very heartening to hear then that he's getting local community involvement and sort of engagement. And as I say, it's part of a suite of actions that the local community can kind of get their own teeth into, a trigger to start positive, proactive engagement along with the work that is already done. And so to my little waterway, I have tried hard to help it. The forces are somewhat against us. I mean, I do live in an urban area, and it is somewhat different from the kind of rural waterways around Ireland. But I suppose because it has been so formative in my life, I just wanted to point out, you know, the life has been drained from this. It is used as a kind of drain. And I think that there is an increasing habit in Ireland of looking at waterways as some things that sort of take our own sins away, of washing away our rubbish and leaving it to the next person. And these are habits we need to stop. And I think that by coming together as a community, you know, we are not isolated. What this little part of the stream connects me with all the other people upstream and downstream who may also see it where it is not culverted, and enjoy it and think about it. And it connects me to them as well. But by coming together as a community, I think it's just so important that we are able to affect that kind of change, because rivers demand collective action for all of us to work together. And as was said by Ray so eloquently, you know, what are rivers for? Well, they aren't just a resource for a select few. They are for everyone, most importantly, the vast array of species that depend on them for life, that we are so lucky still depend on them for life. And I'm fully aware of my responsibility that I have to help this little rivulet. And I hope to find inspiration from the talks today. You know, in my time, I've been so blessed and lucky to be able to meet and report on the kind of work that's being done by scientists over in Burrishoole, by the likes of the Sherkin Island Marine Station with Matt Murphy there, by Mark Boyden in Streamscapes, who really has just done such sterling work. But I know through the kind of efforts that all of you are doing, and I personally am so grateful for them, that in Ireland, we have such an opportunity now to reverse some of the trends that we've seen and to really bring communities together for the betterment of all of us. So I'm going to end here and just say thank you for listening to me and thank you for all the work that you do. And I wish you all the best for this morning's talks, and I'll be listening with huge interest.
Ella, thanks very much. That's beautifully descriptive. You painted a lovely picture of, I suppose, where waters were once were, where we are now, where we need to get back to. I loved your thoughts around the bathing water and how that might be used into the future. And I have to say, it resonated with me. You brought me back to my own childhood. I grew up in New Bridge Street in Borough in County Offaly, and we had a river at the end of the street, and out fishing for pinkeens with jam jars and swimming. And yeah, it would be beautiful to get back to there, you know. And I think you have my mind is firing with ideas now after that talk. Again, thanks very much, Ella.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah. Next now, I'm going to introduce Alan Walsh. I mentioned Alan already. Alan is the communication officer with Law Pro. Alan lives in Dungarvan in County Waterford, near the sea. Again, where he seems to have spent a lot of his childhood on the beach and up and down. He has a love of the outdoors, and he's an active kayaker. And he's also part of the local eco group as well. So not only does Alan work in the area of water quality, but he practices what he preaches as well himself.